our slides to let you know that you have entered the Zoom room for Building a Culture of Community Engagement speaker series. And we are very excited tonight to host a team that had received a Research Partnership Scholars Grant in our first cycle last year. They are studying substance use research in Ghana. And we have the whole team that you have pictured here, and we're going to hand it off to them in a minute to start introductions. Before I begin, I'm going to quickly introduce the team from the Community Engagement Program and the CTSI who's here. We have Nick Tremblay, who's helping us with technical issues, Melanie Rocco, who has been boots on the ground managing this entire session to make it happen, Tracy Battaglia, the co-director for our Community Engagement Program, and I will be your host tonight. I'm Rebecca Lobb. I am the Assistant Director for the Community Engagement Program, so welcome. And tonight's session will focus on the following objections. Not objections, this is not a court, this is a learning session. Objectives. We are focused on learning key elements of partnership building, learning how to navigate systems as a community engaged partnership, and also learning how to implement qualitative research methods in community engaged research. So before we start off, I think I'll tell you a little bit about the Research Partnership Grant after we hear from the scholars, because I'm sure they're going to share information about their experience, and we are currently have grants open for the second cycle. So I'll go through this slide at the end and we'll stop sharing for now. Great. So I'm going to hand it off to Judith Azumah, who will be leading the introductions of her team and the opening for the project. Judith?
Thank you, Rebecca. Hello, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Good morning, good night, wherever you are in the world. So thank you for hosting us today. We really appreciate your time. And so I'll start off by introducing the team. We have Harriet, we have me, we have Yao, we have Kaku, we have Alex, and then Wisdom. So in the picture on my far left is Harriet. Next to her, it's me. Next to me, it's me. And then we have Yao. Below Yao, we have Alex. And then we have Wisdom, then we have Alex, and then we have Kaku. Intersected between Alex and Wisdom, we have the team from Hopeful Way Foundation with us. So move on. So we had some learning objective for our project. One, we wanted to learn key elements of partnership building. How does that look like? And our second objective was to learn to navigate systems as a community engaged partnership. So we looked at the academic institutions, which encompass Boston University, University of Ghana. We looked at government organizations. And then our third objective was to learn how to implement qualitative research methods, looking at interviews, focus groups in community engaged research. These were our learning objectives. How did it all begin? So in May 2021, I was part of the Humphrey Fellowship Program. I was at Virginia Commonwealth University, and one of our professors, Dr. Polster, reached out to us that there was a professor in Boston who was interested in substance use research and HIV. And so three of myself and two other colleagues had separate meetings with him And it was quite an interesting meeting then. We introduced ourselves, talked about all our interest in substance use and the work we were doing currently in Ghana at the time. And so the fellowship was over, but we kept communicating through emails. In October 2021, a dear colleague of mine who is on the call today started his PhD in Canada and reached out that he needed a professor who would be interested in his work. He was looking at sociocultural factors that affect recovery for substance use in Ghana. And so I immediately thought about Kaku and then reached out to him, and he reached out to Wisdom. And so that project also started for Wisdom. And then we kept on with WhatsApp calls, emails. And in June 2022, Kaku reached out talking about the BUCTSI program. And so we sent in our application and we got the grant in August 2022. So what were the lessons that we learned in this process? We learned that we need to share as often as we can, and then hear each other as often as we can, making connections as much as we can, and getting to help people wherever they needed the help. I didn't think reaching out to Kaku for Wisdom would have created a very big team that we have now. And also we learned to take chances. We took a lot of chances on ourselves. We're not too sure this was going to happen, but we decided to give it a try. And thankfully, we are here today. So these are the lessons that we've learned through our partnership, will derive from the fellowship till now. Thank you. So I hand over to Kaku at this point.
Thank you, Judith. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our process for choosing a research question. So to apply for the grant, we put in an idea broadly around these areas that Judith and myself shared, sort of centered on Ghana. That was one common interest, but it included things like substance use, HIV, which is my particular interest, addiction being Judith's professional interest, care for women and girls, and then the idea of standards of care really emanated from Judith's experience working in Ghana as a healthcare provider in a psychiatric care facility. So we took these set of overlapping interests, and then at the same time, Alex, who's also on this team, who you'll be hearing from shortly, had been working on a paper to try to find out some best practices or tips for doing community engaged research in mental health in Ghana. And one of the papers that he came across was this, slightly older 2006 paper that looked at the representation by, I think it's income status of a country, lower and middle income countries compared to higher income countries, and found that about 6% of the papers on mental health published between 1992 and 2001, so again, much older data, included data from lower and middle income countries, of which Ghana is a part, and certainly several countries in Africa are a part. So we took that as a gap that we had the potential to help fill, and chose Ghana for a couple of different reasons. One, many of us call Ghana home. And two, the policy environment we thought was supportive. So in 2012, the Mental Health Act was passed that really shifted how, from a policy perspective, our government thought about mental health, and sort of prioritized it, created protections for people with mental health problems, created government agencies to support the treatment of mental health diseases, and that effort was endorsed by the WHO as a best practice in mental health legislation. And one of the people cited in this paper that talked about this law, Professor Nsiah, is sort of a luminary in mental health in Ghana, and actually within the West African region. Judith was teaching me recently. The second policy that was very favorable and made Ghana a good choice for this is the 2020 Narcotics Control Commission Act that targets both drug demand and drug supply. Previously, I think that there's been a lot of focus on reducing supply, right? And so it's very much focused on criminal putting people in prison for selling drugs, things like that. But this act also included reducing demand and reframed addiction from a moral failing, which I think is sort of how we culturally typically looked at it, to a public health issue, and called for and promised support for research within addiction. So if the policy is going in the right direction, we thought it's good to not have to be swimming upstream against policy. And so for those reasons, we thought Ghana was a great place to do this work. The landscape of addiction care in Ghana, a lot of it is provided from government-funded facilities, the Mental Health Authority, as we just talked about, Narcotics Control Commission, and the major psychiatric hospitals that provide care are all government-funded facilities. There are non-governmental organizations or not-for-profits that provide care as well, including religious organizations, and then there's private or for-profit hospitals that also have some addiction-related work. And based on Judith, Wisdom, Alex, who all have clinical expertise in Ghana, we identified these 4 gaps that we didn't have enough trained addiction professionals in the country. There was a lot of use of dry detox, and some instances of exploitative treatment that were not evidence-based, being used by, again, very non-clinical settings. And this was something that Judith raised really early on, that if you went to one setting, it really depended on who you met there, the kind of care that you would get for the same substance use disorder, whereas if you went somewhere else within Accra, which is the capital city, let alone different cities across the country. So we formulated as our question, how do we standardize substance use treatment, substance use disorder treatment in Ghana? And one of the things that we did really early on was to seek input from people who are in the community thinking about substance use disorder already. And that's where Hopeful Way Foundation comes in. I'll ask Yao, maybe when he's talking, to do a little bit better of an introduction to Hopeful Way Foundation. But one anecdote that I'll share is, we met with folk at this foundation, and it was really one of the leaders in that foundation who strongly urged us to account for family involvement in treatment for substance use disorders in Ghana, and really sort of helped us fill a blind spot that we had in our thinking about building this program. So really strong plug there for community input and hearing and listening to that community input. The plan that we developed to sort of try to execute this research question involved getting people together who were experts in substance use disorder. This includes people whose expertise was professional and people whose expertise was lived. We wanted to create a forum where we could listen to them, they could listen to each other, so they share how they approached their work, or for them to share their expertise in their lived experience. Analyze what we're hearing to try to extract common themes, find unique stories, and then do a comparison between what current practice is and what international standards say. And if there's any discrepancy, share that back with the people who shared with us their experience in the first place. And then finally to act, to do something with what we learn. Hopefully we have crystallized the gap in either the impact of not having standards, or the impact of maybe having the wrong standards, and apply for future grants to help fill those gaps. I'll put a small asterisk on future clinical or community intervention, and ask Judith maybe to talk a little bit more down the line about one such intervention that she's been spearheading. So lessons learned and sort of coming to the research question, having a strong understanding of local context is critical. I mean, this project would be nowhere without Judith, Wisdom, Alex, who've all practiced in Ghana, Yao and Ni, who are instrumental within the Hopeful Way Foundation family. They guided this project to its current iteration, and I think made it relevant. Staying connected, I think Judith has already mentioned a little bit, is incredibly important. And then, you know, not letting things go that don't seem okay. This idea of standards that, you know, again, Judith raised in our first conversation, became the topic of our research project, and is an example of questioning things that don't seem okay. So I'm going to pass it on to Alex to talk about the next phase of the development of this project.
All right, so thank you, Kaku. Thank you, Judith. So once we had a research plan, we were able to identify that our research was going to involve human subjects, because we're going to interview some individuals with lived experience of substance use, as well as some professionals in substance use care. So we needed to apply for IRB approval. So coming from an academic institution, because Kaku and I are here in Boston, and the rest of the team members are all in Ghana. Sorry, but for Wisdom, who is in Canada pursuing his PhD. So we first did a submission to the BU IRB, and we submitted our application in September 26 because the grant was awarded in August. And we had the approval in October 24th, because we were able to write to the IRB and let them know that this grant was just for 9 months, and we needed to kickstart as soon as possible so we can actualize our objectives. So whilst the IRB at Boston University were reviewing our application, they came across the Ghanaian context, which dominated the grant, and asked if we had submitted an application for an IRB approval also in Ghana. So earlier, our thinking was because we were going from here, or if we had the approval from here, it was going to cover for the work we were doing in Ghana, because all our partners in Ghana were all community members who were not researchers. But with having a conversation with the IRB, we realized that we needed an IRB approval from Ghana too. So we reached out to the team in Ghana, and through strong collaboration, we identified that we have the Ghana Health Service IRB board, which grants IRB for research of this kind when the community members or the individuals involved do not belong to any academic institution. So we quickly assembled our documents and made an application to the Ghana Health Service IRB in November 9, 2022. And earlier on, because we had a short time, we needed an expedite review. So we wrote to the board there that we needed an expedite review, but we were told they had a couple of works and couldn't consider us for an expedite review. So the next thing was, okay, whilst we wait on them, is there any other option we could explore that would help us begin the work as soon as possible? So we quickly were able to identify that we had a Noguchi Memorial Institute for Medical Research, which is affiliated to the University of Ghana, but does review IRB for works not only on the University of Ghana medical campus. So through talks and everything, we spoke with them, and they gave us some sort of hope that as at the time we were talking to them, they could consider us for an expedite IRB review. So we quickly assembled our documents, and on November 21st, we did submit for IRB review. Then along the line, December came, the festivities in Ghana and everything came along with some holidays. So things didn't go as promised. And so we had to wait. And luckily for us, within the first cycle of holidays after the Christmas, we had a notification from the Ghana Health Service IRB that after we had spoken to them and they had said no to us, a chance came, and knowing how we express our needs, they checked in our grant. So it was in for an expedite review, and we could expect it early in January. Truthful to that, in January on the 4th, we received approval from the Ghana Health Service IRB, and now we were torn between whether halting the application we've already sent to Noguchi or letting it go through. But at the team meeting, we agreed that, okay, this is all about partnership building, and we are not looking to limiting ourselves to only these grants. We're also looking at a very big picture in the near future. So if that is the case, why don't we allow our application to also go through the Noguchi system, get it tested, and also make some connections there, so that in the near future, if we were to apply for a different IRB, we know that we have two options. We have we know the Ghana Health Service system, we know the Noguchi system, and that could make it quite easy for us to see where we are going and who we are talking to. And so we allowed the application to also still go through. We did the payment and everything, and on February 1, we had the approval. So currently, the work we are doing has the backing of 3 strong institutions that have granted us approval because they believe our work is going to make impact. Next slide, please. So just from the IRB approvals, we learned a couple of things which we would want to share. Yeah, we learned to identify options. So like I mentioned, when we realized maybe the Ghana Health Service probably was going to give us delay and we needed to catch up with time, we looked up for options within the Ghanaian context, and that led us to the Noguchi IRB. We tested it, and truly it was going to work for us, and we even have the approval. And also to learn from some mistakes. Yes, we are not here because we are perfect. We made some mistakes along the line because this was a new thing to us all. Our community members, as I mentioned, are not researchers, so had not done research, and so they had not applied to any IRB before. So the first mistake we made was when we needed to apply to the Ghana Health Service IRB, we went to their website, downloaded an application packet, because this time it was in a Word format and we had to fill in the information. We did all this, did the submission, only to be told that the packet we downloaded was an outdated version. So they had to now send us the updated version they had, and we now had to fill it. So from here, we realized that maybe if we had reached out to them earlier enough that, hey, we want to submit an application for approval, they probably would have given us the most recent version, not to have us work on the old version and send it and to be told that. So going forward, we are going to always reach out before we probably even submit our application. And two, we talk about the timing and patience, yeah, because IRB, especially for academic researchers, you know, IRB usually would want to take time, go through and scrutinize every point you make it in your application before they give you the heads up. So usually that patience is required, especially when you are dealing with more than one IRB. In our case, we had to do at least, the least we could have done was 2, even though we did 3. So if you are going to do more than one, know that you need double patience. So if every day with one application, you are like, hey, it's taking time, know that if it's 2, it's going to take time, and it's going to take time. So thank you. I'll pass on to Harriet, I think. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Please, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay, so good evening to everyone. Good morning to others. It's the weather, you are just waking up. So I'm talking about people who and people with lived experience of substance use disorder. What did the team do? We had to listen to those who have gone through the mill before. And so we began with identifying clients with substance use disorder. And this were people who have been to treatment in my facility. I've had some, not some, but I've had engagement with them over the period, some 2 years, some 3 years. And it's very important to note that this kind of collaboration, the way you relate with clients, would help in such research. I never knew I was going to be involved in such a research. And so this partnership or therapeutic relationship I had with them was very important and really helped in this research. And so I reached out to them and let them know what we're all about, and at the end of the day, what it was going to help the Ghanaian community to do. And they were more than excited. I reached out to 12 actually, but we were able to get 8 of them, 7 in person, and then 1 at another one I met in another location. 7 I met at the Hopeful Way. And so they looked at the consent form and read through it, and they were, yay, let's go, let's do this, because then it's going to help others in the near future. And so they were more than enthusiastic to be part of the team, to be part of this research. And so we did the interview, and some of the questions asked includes like perception about addiction, and all of them, I would say, said they never thought addiction was a disease. In fact, they thought, well, it's a social thing, and that you get involved in drugs, and then when you get to an older stage and you want to be a responsible person, you just put it aside and then continue with your life. But then came to realize that it was a problem, a disease actually, and that the stopping wasn't just about putting the drugs down. They needed to go through a whole system of recovery. And so that was something very insightful, because for someone not knowing that what I'm doing is a disease or what I'm participating in is actually going to destroy me or going to cause problems for me in the future was very insightful. And then again, the barriers to seeking treatment. The first thing that was mentioned was finances, because it was quite difficult for most of them to get the financial support to come into treatment. And so that was the first thing they mentioned. And again, the availability of treatment facilities. In Ghana, all the public health or all the public institutions that care for addiction is in the southern part. So 2 in Accra, 1 in Cape Coast. The private ones are really scattered all over the country. And so then a major barrier to treatment was finding the facility to be in and then getting the help. And so that was one of the things they mentioned. And then the experience in treatment. And so Kaku mentioned the need for standardized care, and it's very true. So depending on the facility you entered, you realize that even in the same hospital. So for my hospital, there were 2 different wards that took care of people with substance use disorder. And again, the standard wasn't the same. And so then you find out that whatever is happening in facility A or in ward A wasn't the same as what was happening in another ward. And so their experiences in treatment were very different based on who you met. Okay, so then we go on to the transformation. And I'm so happy to talk about the transformation, because when you've worked in the space and you see someone come in all looking down, looking like, you know what, I can't do this anymore, just leave me to die. And some way, somehow, through process, through encouraging the person, of course, the need for professionals to come in also really helps. And then a few months later, you see the person change, and that is the picture we have over there. And so the transformation begins for the individual. Identifying triggers is very important. So you know that this is what triggers me, this is what will cause me to go back. And some of these triggers are as simple as something emotional, anger, it really takes people back, or not having expectations being met, it actually affects them. Then seeking professional support is very, very important. So they spoke about the fact that they didn't think professional help was needed because, well, I started it, I took the first alcohol, I'm taking the first cocaine, and so then why do I need somebody to help me stop? I can just put it down and then go away. But then later on, they realized that they needed somebody to help them, and the professional support comes in the form of a team. So the medical doctor is needed, the psychologist is needed, the addiction counselor is needed, the occupational therapist is needed, and all these people come together to make the transformation possible. Then the other thing is a change of environment. Very, very, very important, because they realize, according to them, they realize that it's being in your own space and wanting change is very, very difficult. And so the change in environment for them coming into a treatment space really helped them. And so that is the transformation they went through. Now, lessons learned whilst doing this project. And I found out that SUD treatment is not readily available being in that space. Apart from, like I said, the southern part of Ghana, when you go up north, it's difficult, very, very, if not impossible, to get treatment, holistic treatment for someone who is in substance use disorder. So that is what I can say. And then again, clients wanting to, it's very, very important to have that kind of relationship for a person to open up. And so this was really, really very important to our research, because clients were ready to talk. They were ready to give us their experiences, so that in the near future, the changes that may come from this would help the next person who is suffering with substance use disorder. And then it was very, very important because it helped facilitate the research, because without them, we couldn't have done this. And so that is what I have to say. I'll pass on to Yao to continue with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet. And my name is Yao. And I thank all those who presented before me. Good afternoon and good evening to you all. Well, Judith, Kaku, and Harriet all mentioned Hopeful Way Foundation. And just briefly to talk about Hopeful Way a bit, we are a non-governmental organization that pioneers addiction treatment and recovery in Ghana, promoting it for both the person with SUD and the families too. And we are involved in employee assistance programs, recovery tourism. So anytime you want to visit Ghana, just let us know. We'll definitely give you a place to stay and give you a thorough touring of Ghana. Okay. Well, Harriet handled the lived experience one-on-ones. Then the team thought, well, let's have all these people in one space. So we had 17 people with lived experience, ranging from 5 months to 7 years in recovery. We segregated them into 11 male and 6 female. All of these had the question guides given to them. And we divided them into 3 groups, 2 all-male groups and 1 all-female group. And after all these were done, we brought them all back to the wider audience for them to share exactly what they went through, and for people to ask them questions, to critique, and also to have answers for some of their questions. The lessons that we learned when we had all these 17 people gathered together. One was about the treatment barriers. In Ghana, if a man is drinking or using drugs, it is a problem, but not as much as a woman doing same. As such, women find it difficult accessing treatment. And the language. Almost all the treatment facilities do their programs in only English. We realized that it could be possible that even people from outside Ghana, from neighboring Mali, Burkina Faso, Togo, Benin, all come to Ghana to access treatment. And what they have to go through is they had to understand English, which is originally not their first language. The gender bias among providers. Across the facilities in Ghana, majority of those providing treatment are men. just few are women. Well, we are happy to say that Judith and Harriet, who are both on the call now, provide treatment, and they're just some of the few women provided addiction treatment in Ghana. Majority of the addiction professionals are male. And the treatment needs for women not met. If we look at the treatment facilities, it was until recently that there was a new innovation by Judith and Harriet to have an all-female rehabilitation center catering for just women. All the treatment facilities who tried providing treatment for women are all mixed facilities. As such, the women felt left out. There were many activities that they were not involved in because possibly, although they belonged to one treatment center, their housing was a distance away, so they could not be part of the regular programs or activities going on. We learned all these, and as I said, we are happy that Judith and Harriet took it upon themselves after the focus group to bring about this all-female rehab.
And yeah, I think what they thought about is happening, right?
It is, yes, it is,
Okay.
it is.
So I think I'll pick up from Yao, thank you. So the next phase was to talk to people who did substance use disorder treatment professionally, one-on-one. And what did we do? We really leaned into Judith and Harriet and Yao's network. And because of them and their working experience, when we called, people picked up the phone. And they were really excited to hear what we were doing and to contribute. We set up one-on-one calls with them and asked them about their experiences, their frustrations, barriers and facilitators. And a couple of things that came out. So these calls would not have happened were it not for the relationships that Judith, Yao, and Harriet already had within the addiction treatment community. There's growing interest in addiction, but it is still highly stigmatized. In fact, mental health is stigmatized and addiction is double stigmatized. And so if you have both addiction and a co-occurring mental health disorder, the barriers to seeking treatment are even higher. And everybody we spoke to wants the best for their clients. Everybody is trying to improve the services that are available. And all of that was really encouraging to hear. I will now pass it, I think, to, wait, have I messed up, guys?
That's fine.
Oh, my
That's right.
Judith, are you doing this one or am I doing this one?
Yeah, sure. Let me just go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. So we further had engagement with all the stakeholders that we spoke to one-on-one. And first of all, we sent official invitation to them. And then we planned 6 to 8 hour event at Werekuu Foundation. It created an opportunity for most of them to engage and connect. And it was a very insightful discussion, hearing from stakeholders in terms of people working at Narcotics Control Commission, those working in mental health authority, those working in the rehabs itself, NGOs. It was quite insightful because we learned, so let's move on to the lessons we learned. We learned about efficiency, how our stakeholders want to see that substance use treatment is like and what it is currently. And then we learned through a lot of discomfort. There were one occasion where we had to deal with professional conflict. So we had an instance where a psychiatrist and then an addiction counselor trying to explain their reasons why we think that the psychiatrists need to learn more about substance use. and the psychiatry thinking, why do I have to learn more about substance use? Because this is part of my job. So it was quite interesting because people felt, I think at the end of the day, we came to a conclusion that we collectively need to learn something. We collectively need to know about the clientele that we are serving and how best to serve them well. We also recognize the expertise in the room. There was huge expertise in the room, and then we also learned how to trust our team, without which it would have been very difficult to continue with the project. Many people would have felt that they don't think they were ready to be part of this process, but the trust within the team, especially for those of us who have worked with most of these stakeholders, made it quite an easy process for us. So thank you, Kaku. I hand over to me.
Hi, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon. My name is Abbey. Yes, so as we are all aware, the qualitative analysis involves basically organizing, examination, and interpreting the data we obtained during the study. So I'll talk about the transcription. Yes. So given that this study was a qualitative research, we basically sought to probe or to do an in-depth probe and questioning in order to gain some understanding of the research and also help to also answer the research questions as well. So in view of this, the sources of data were one-on-ones with persons with lived experiences and focus group with persons with lived experiences, and also one-on-ones with professionals and focus group with professionals. And after these sessions, we had raw data in the form of audio files, and they were 34 hours. And given the sheer volume of hours, we decided to seek or look for 2 transcribers to help us to transcribe the data. And some of our team members recommended some transcribers, and we also went, or I in particular went on LinkedIn to try and get some other qualified person to help us with the transcription process. And we used the Box app, to send the files to the transcribers with a passcode. And one of the things we planned to do was to do the data extraction in tandem with the transcription. And because, like I said, of the number of audio files, what we decided to do was to come up with a strategy. And so we decided to work on the one-on-ones, with the persons in recovery and professionals in order to get some themes we could work with, and which we would eventually refine as we get more transcripts and as we get more information from the other transcripts. And of course, one important thing that I also need to mention is the fact that we had to provide the transcribers with the nature of the research and the context, to help them in the transcription process. And after all this, we also learned some lessons. Yes, one of the things that we missed was to label the recorders so that we know exactly what recorder is capturing what information, and that was one thing that we really learned. And I'm sure going forward we would be mindful of that. And so we had at certain points we had several devices capturing the same information, so we have to spend time to organize the data so that they won't be sort of redundant. And also, we also checked the transcripts to make sure that they were capturing the information we needed. And in Ghana we have over 80 languages, and during the focus, one of the sessions, there were times where participants answered questions in the local language, and so one of the things that we really need to have learned going forward is to be mindful of that, and yes, so that's all I have. And so I would give the baton to my brother Wisdom to continue. Thank you.
Wisdom, please unmute.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil, and thank you, other presenters so far. I'm going to lean on the existing protocol to continue my presentation. We are currently at the stage of data extraction, and this particular process has particularly been divided into 4 main steps currently. As Neil rightly stated, after the interviews were conducted from or by different people from different backgrounds, we identified professional data transcribers who are currently or who have transcribed these kind of data. So currently at the data extraction phase, we needed to perform a very important assignment after we received the data. That is to make sure that we stay very close to the data, the audio and the data we have. So we first of all started by ensuring that we listen to the audios as well as read the text to make sure that what we have, the professional transcribers have transcribed exactly what the participants have actually recorded in the audio recordings that we have. So after that, we identify that because of the diverse background of the team, academics, clinicians, and other supporting staff who are all experienced in various fields, we needed to be on the same platform. So because of that, we reached out to a seasoned professor at Boston University by name Jennifer Palmer, who actually provided a very intensive training for the team on how to use rapid approach in qualitative data analysis, which was very, helpful. So subsequently, having received this immense training, the team thought it wise to also meet afterwards, which we did, and actually gave ourselves an assignment as to how to develop it, a workable template. We all did this individually and collectively came together and agreed on a harmonized Excel sheet, which we are going to use for the data extraction. So having done that, we have to now further divide ourselves into, sub-teams. So currently we have 2 teams made up of 1 with academic background and 1 clinician. We try to put ourselves together to do the data extraction. So currently, as the data extraction is ongoing, we have identified domains, subdomains, and supporting code. So that's the level we are currently at, and it is still ongoing. So after this stage, we now have to get ourselves in mind to see how we're going to collapse these things to form teams and sub-teams moving forward. So this is actually an iterative process, which is currently, ongoing. But having reached this stage so far, what are some of the lessons we have learned? We have realized that it is important to clarify the approach to the data extraction. I believe it is for this reason that we invited a seasoned expert, seasoned professor to support us in the training process to be able to do this or overcome this particular process. Then one other lesson we learned is that we identified as an ongoing process so far that there are various sources of support to individuals who are with substance use disorders. These sources of support are not standardized. That is, we have people from religious organizations, herbalists, and all that. These are preliminary findings so far that are kind of lessons we have learned so far. So, as I mentioned earlier, it is for the purposes of standardization in this kind of data extraction process, there was a need to invite a resource person that has been very, 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 supportive. And the final thing to say as a lesson learned is that for the purposes of concealing identity of participants in this particular study, we have consistently used pseudonyms in the process of the data extraction, the data transcription and extraction. Thank you.
Wisdom, thank you. I realize that our time is pretty much up and we haven't left much time for questions. We are at analysis and action, and that is really all I wanted to share at this point. We have so many people to thank, and we can't do it in person. We can't do it by person, but big picture, BU CTSI Community Partners Grant is a phenomenal funding opportunity. Anybody that wants to talk about it, we will talk your ear off about it. We will give you our grant that was funded to use as a template or as an example. The learning community is probably the finest feature of this grant funding. The money is nice too. And the Hopeful Way Foundation, Yao described, incredible partner and was the recipient of the funding and allowed us to actually do the work that we just talked about, and all of our experts who helped make this product a reality. So that's our presentation. If anybody has questions, I'm at least happy to stay back. It's really late in Ghana, so I completely understand if the Ghana team has to go off bed or continue the evening. And you all as the audience have been incredible. Thank you.
Amazing work, team. I have to say, I am so impressed with what you've accomplished in a 9-month period. Really was the length of the grant. I know it's been a little bit longer, but the way your team has navigated all of the challenges with the geographic differences, with the IRBs, with the qualitative research methods is truly, truly impressive. So I appreciate, Kaku, you mentioning that you and your team would endorse the partnership grant, but I have to say, I can't think of a better example of success with this grant than what you've shown us today. So thank you very much for coming and talking about your experience. I had some questions set up, but I know our time is technically ended. I do want to open it up for anyone in the audience who might have questions. Please feel free to take the opportunity now to ask. And you can just come off mute. You're getting a lot of praise in the chat. Before folks leave, I do want to put in a plug for the Open Research Partnership Scholars Grant. As this team has shared with you, this is a grant that provides funding for you to really develop a partnership between community and academic researchers, and we do consider the community members researchers as well. It's funding for a 9-month period. The focus is on building relationships so that you can identify a specific project that you can work on, creating a partnership structure, exploring shared research interests, and developing a research plan. And next month, we will have another team who received funding for the first cycle of the partnership grant. They will be talking about the intersection of mental health and economic development and the lessons learned from their partnership. This will be next month will be our final seminar for this academic year, so I hope you all can join us. And since I didn't see any questions, but if I could ask one quick question, because I'm burning with curiosity, what are your plans with the partnership now? What are your next steps?
Share a little bit. Judith, actually, maybe Judith, would you like to share maybe about the work you're doing in Abbey?
Okay, That's fine. So as myself and Harriet, and then our supervisor, Dr. Anand Jadi, a consultant psychiatrist, have been talking with even the team and trying to set up an all-women treatment facility. And so we've been looking for space, and somehow we had a beautiful space. Though small, but it can take about 7 women at a time. And so currently we have 2 women in-house, and that's like exciting. We're excited about it. And we hope that we would grow from here and have a bigger space to take in more women. Hopefully that we'll have a space for 100 women at some point. Thank you.
It's wonderful. And it's such a great example of community engaged research that contributes to research knowledge, but also gives back something to practice. So thank you, Judith. And I wish you the best of luck with the new center, but also I love how you're dreaming big for the next larger center. Great. Well, thank you all very much for joining us tonight. I will create some quiet space for people to just say goodbye or to ask other questions as people begin to sign off.